Dr. Horror's Summer School. Chapter 1. Ominous Summer School. For Arvin Gallagher, the final minutes of the school year might have been the most stressful. The twitching in his eyes reflected the nervousness he shared with each of his classmates. "Mr. Collins!" echoed through the room as a trembling boy rose from his chair and walked to the teacher's desk. For anyone who has spent 2 years learning at Alexander Fleming boarding school, the cause of such anxiety consuming Class 9B should be perfectly clear. The students were receiving results of their final science test this year, and the teacher assigned to teaching science at the school was the infamous Dr. Horace Rorschach. He was feared by anyone who happened to have a single lesson with him behind the teacher's desk. Not a single student could tell exactly what was the most dread-inducing in him. Maybe it was his pseudo-kindness behind which hid cruel, unforgiving strictness. Maybe the fact he could talk on the topic of the lesson for unmeasurable amounts of time, only to randomly pause for a minute, losing himself completely in his thoughts. Or maybe his ominous grin, which never left his face no matter what he felt. Maybe even his hair, which was much, much too white for a man in his mid-30s, and gave birth to a lot of terrifying theories as to why it was this way. The students of Dr. Horror Rorschach quickly noticed how out of the first 3 letters of his first and last name, the word horror could be formed. Combined with Horace's nature, this simple bureaucratic irony began a universally feared but overall fitting nickname. "Miss Franklin?" Dr. Horror called another dread-filled student over. "Just not a one, just not a one, just not a one," prayed Arvin in his mind, wishing to just pass and storm out of the classroom. He was overwhelmed by fear of how Dr. Horror might scold him. If that was even what he was willing to stop on, not that anything more ever happened, but one never knows. "Mr. Gallagher?" "It's over," thought Arvin as he stood up and began walking towards his teacher. He saw as his whole year at Class 9 ran in front of his eyes. He reached his hand to see how much trouble he had. He saw the number 7. "Congratulations, Mr. Gallagher. How you developed your expertise in science over this year is the most fascinating thing I have witnessed in this school in years," said Dr. Rorschach. Arvin could not believe what he saw and heard. "Thank you, Mr. Rorschach," Arvin said, and walked back to his seat filled with relief, but with a droplet of anxiety still lingering around him. With a feeling of fulfillment, Arvin walked down the hallway to his dorm room. He couldn't wait for all the adventures awaiting him during the summer break. He would finally leave school and move back to his parents, who promised him they would go on a cruise through the English Channel and spend some time in Cherbourg. And the second half of the summer break he would spend with his grandparents in Cornwall. He loved the countryside atmosphere in their place. Arvin looked forward to the day of his graduation for one more reason. That day, the new issue of his favorite comic book, Alpha Watch, was released. Arvin adored Alpha Watch. The story of a group of vigilantes fighting crime in High London, a futuristic city placed on a space station orbiting the moon. To say Arvin loved Alpha Watch would be an understatement. This particular comic book has influenced him so much that because of it, he wanted to become a writer. It didn't matter for him if he would be writing for a comic book, a video game, or a television series. New and new stories were forming in his head, and he wanted to tell them to the world. "Hey, can you watch where you're going?" Arvin suddenly heard from behind a corner. "Haha, I'm sorry," said a short student with curly brown hair. A massive senior with shortly cut brown hair was pushing another student against the wall. They crashed into each other, but unlike in young adult slice-of-life novels, it didn't seem like the beginning of undying affection. Arvin immediately knew it was one of the bullies Fleming School feared the most. He didn't know why, but he decided to intervene. "Hunter!" he shouted. The tormentor looked in his direction. He quickly jogged to Arvin with heavy steps. "What? Can't you see I'm in the middle of a little discussion over here?" "No, I see what you call discussion is just a textbook example of bullying." "Mind your own nose!" shouted Hunter as he unleashed a massive strike to Arvin's head. The boy wasn't expecting this in the slightest. He couldn't help but fall on his right hand, almost fracturing it. "And now to be done with you," Hunter said to the bullied boy, but he couldn't finish. Arvin grabbed him by his neck and threw him back. The two immediately began fighting, punch after punch, strike after strike. They fought for who the money should belong to, and neither of them were willing to give up. Until... "Am I interrupting something important?" they heard in the distance. As the two looked up, they saw the man they feared the most, Dr. Horror himself. The two boys were sitting in the office of the school's principal, Jordan Hawk. Usually, if a student ended up in his office, he could consider himself done for. Principal Hawk did not scare students as much as Dr. Horror did. However, even he had quite a reputation. If you did good, he would be your first and last line of defense, whether you needed it or not. But if you did bad, he was not a bit reluctant to give you adequate punishment provided by the school's Book of Rules. Book of Rules that has been written back when the school was a Christian private school for intelligent sons of wealthy Protestants. Back when the school didn't even carry the name of Alexander Fleming, and hasn't been updated ever since. And Arvin and Hunter knew all too well that according to the book, they were on a crash course with immediate expulsion, with close to no right for appeal. "Are my assumptions correct?" asked the principal. "Yes, sir," the two boys answered. "Hunter, do you realize what you did was an impulsive anger release?" "Now that I think of it, I can see my mistake," said Hunter, in a way no one present could tell whether he was lying or not. "And Arvin, I appreciate that you stood up for your friend, but I assume you know violence is never necessary?" "It was a mistake, I'll admit. After witnessing Hunter's deeds for all this time, I just assumed he is irredeemable," said Arvin, not sure if he even believed his own words. "All right. Now that I know for sure what you did, I have just one more question for you two. Do you know the school's rules say there is only one punishment applicable for your misdoings?" "No," the student silently shouted. "I'm afraid I have to sentence you to immediate expulsion," said the principal, still obeying decades-old codex. "If I am allowed to present my opinion, Principal Hawk." Dr. Horror decided to try persuading the principal into some scheme. It was nearly impossible to ever tell his emotions, but at this moment Arvin and Hunter could have sworn without a shade of doubt that their teacher was excited about his idea. No, perhaps he was excited about the two students' participation. "Yes, Dr. Rorschach? Perhaps it would be better for each of us if Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Anderson could partake in my famous summer school program, and if they fail to pass, then and only then shall we re-evaluate their expulsion." "I see. Yes, that would indeed be a great idea." "I am delighted you seem to like my idea, Principal Hawk. Now, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Gallagher, do you wish to take this chance?" The idea of attending summer school, one overseen by Dr. Horror himself, nevertheless frightened Arvin. But after a moment of thinking, he came to the conclusion that everything will be better than immediate expulsion right at the beginning of summer break. And so the two students reluctantly agreed. On his road to the first day of summer school, Arvin felt unusual. He bought a freshly released issue of Alpha Watch so he could read it on the bus, but he was not able to focus at all. All he could do was to squish a rubber ball. On the way from the bus stop to school building and to the classroom, his mind was occupied by various methods of torture Dr. Horror could impose on him. Maybe he would play hypnotic tapes with subliminal messages that would turn him into a perfect teacher's pet. Perhaps he would make him watch documentary movies while wearing this weird spider-looking hat that prevented the wearer from ever blinking, like in that one movie Uncle Luke showed him. It might even be that he would perform his own version of the Milgram experiment, this time with a real shocking device. As Arvin approached the doorknob, his heart skipped a beat or two. For a moment, he began doubting the decisions that brought him to this place. But now it couldn't be changed. So he opened the door and entered the classroom. "Ah, Mr. Gallagher, excellent timing. We were about to begin the lesson," Dr. Horror greeted the poor student. Arvin sat in the second row and looked around the class. In the back row, he saw Hunter with his legs on his desk. In front of him, he saw two girls. The shorter one was nervously shaking her leg, and the taller one was holding the other girl's hand to calm her down. And Dr. Horror was writing the big underlined word "Welcome" on the whiteboard. As he placed the marker back on the small metal shelf, he turned back towards his students. "It is delightful to see you all gathered here just in time," Rorschach said to the class. Not a single soul, except maybe the tall girl in the front, seemed to share the teacher's enthusiasm. "It seems to me that not every one of you knows each other too well. That's why I want to begin our summer school with a simple task. Introductions." The calm girl raised her hand over her red-haired head. "Yes, Miss Corrigan?" the teacher called her. "What do we have to introduce about ourselves, Mr. Rorschach?" "Excellent question. Not much at the moment," Dr. Rorschach answered, with his grin becoming even wider than usual. "First and last name, a nickname if you would like to, your class, why are you here, and what is your greatest ambition for the future?" As he finished counting, he looked at the red-haired student who asked the question. "Perhaps you would like to introduce yourself first." "All right, I can try," she said as she rose from her chair. "My name is Giselle Corrigan. You can call me Cory. I'm pleased to meet you all. I'm from class 10B. I came here to correct my failed science course. My ambition," she stopped for a moment, "is to become a teacher in our school of English." "Wonderful, truly wonderful," said Rorschach. "Who wants to go next? Maybe you?" He pointed at Arvin after a moment of complete silence. "Yes, I can. So, I'm Arvin Gallagher from class 9B. I'm here because I had a fight with someone. In the future..." Arvin had to think about his answer for a moment. The truth was that reading Alpha Watch and other similar comic books made him want to become a writer. He even has written some short stories, but wasn't quite fond of them. He wasn't feeling confident in his writing skills just yet. As such, he was scared that someone might have wanted to read them. Nevertheless, he decided to tell the truth. Maybe it was Dr. Horror's presence that convinced him it would be a good idea. He wasn't sure. "In the future, I want to become a writer." "Well then, I hope you find some good inspiration on your road," said Dr. Rorschach. "Who wants to..." Horror's speech was interrupted by Giselle raising her hand. "Yes, Miss Corrigan? Would you like to ask your friend a question?" Arvin momentarily froze. He prayed in his mind she would not ask him about anything he had written. "Was the fight you fought supposed to defend someone?" So that was what she was interested in. Arvin felt relieved and answered honestly, without a bit of reluctancy. "Yes, let's say I noticed someone being bullied." "Amazing! I like you already." Dr. Horrors chuckled under his nose and began further questioning. "Truly an interesting story. I know, I was there. But I would like to continue with our little exercise." This time, the short black girl who has been silent and nervous all this time threw her hand in the air, indicating she wished to speak. Well, Miss Cassidy, I pass the baton on to you. The girl stood up as her curls nearly covered her face. She made a few coughs to clear her throat and tune her voice. Good morning, she started. Please call me Dawn. Dawn Cassidy. I'm from class 10A. I'm here because someone mistook my medicine for drugs. I know I should have corrected them. Dawn rapidly swallowed her saliva to not continue her sentence and not break into tears. I'm sorry, never mind that. And my deepest wish is to become a movie actress. Fantastic wish. Let me wish you an Oscar or a BAFTA. Horace seemed truly excited. And it appears it's only you who is left, Mr. Anderson. Hunter placed his legs back on the ground in a wide stride and stroked the desk with his open arm. Alright, name's Hunter Anderson, class 11A. How I ended up here was already explained by our pretty boy Arvin. My goal is to become rich. I don't care how, I'm just sick of my neighborhood. I see. Horace straightened his body up in a terrifying way and clapped his hand with enthusiasm. However, much he was excited for the summer school at the beginning has tripled by this moment. He proceeded to deliver his own introduction speech. These are all interesting stories you have presented. Now let me tell you mine story. I hope it will interest you as well. My name, of course, is Dr. Horace Rorschach, also known as Dr. Horror, as many of you call me. At this moment, all of the students have been struck by the purest form of fear they felt in their lives. Yes, I know, do not think I do not. And since I know one of your secrets, let me exchange it for one of mine. I am here because I would like to play a little game with you. The kids felt more and more anxious. What kind of game was Dr. Rorschach talking about? Was it some kind of experiment? Were the rumors about him torturing the summer school students true? No. The truth was beyond imagination even for them who knew so much anxiety-inducing rumors about their science teacher. My biggest dream is to conquer the world. Excuse me, Giselle asked. Did I hear you right, Teach? Do you want to conquer the world? Exactly. And since the introductions are over, I will now present you with your goal in my summer school. The students couldn't believe their ears. They were sitting in shock as Horace took out a bundle of photos and a couple of magnets. In the previous years, I have committed some truly wonderful crimes, like, for example, stealing the original Shakespeare's manuscripts, he said while putting the photo of the manuscript of Othello on the whiteboard and secured it with a yellow magnet. Or poisoning some high-seated bank clerks. He showed a photo of a group of people with symptoms of mercury poisoning lying down on the hospital beds. Or even destroying our lovely Big Ben. This time the photo was a cutout from a newspaper article about a bombing incident that destroyed the faces of Big Ben last August. Wait a minute, Don said while breathing heavily. These were all your doings? Yes, indeed, Miss Cassidy, and I am very proud of them. You're sick, shouted Hunter, throwing his body out of his chair, which fell over with a loud bang. I may not be a virtue, but you're just sick. Everyone has a backstory, Mr. Anderson. Arvin just sat silently. His heartbeat was rapidly increasing. This was the closest in his life he ever was to a panic attack. So, it not only turned out Dr. Horror lived up to his ironic nickname, but he was a serial terrorist. He knew this man for such a long time, but all this exceeded his boldest imaginations. Now, on to the goal of our peculiar summer school course. I plan to take control over England, maybe even the entire United Kingdom, by the middle of August. And from that point, I will proceed until I achieve total world domination. But if you succeed in stopping me, by that time I will gladly give up, go straight to jail, and you will pass the course. I played this game 3 times in the past, but as you have seen, I came out victorious every time. One more time, Teach. How much time do we have? Asked Giselle, being strangely calm for the situation presented to her. Let us say until August 10th, Miss Corrigan. Oh, right, I almost forgot. Do not even think of telling the police about what we are doing in our lessons. I bought them over. Arvin couldn't believe what he heard. Did Mr. Rorschach really control the police? It was unbelievable. That being said, it was also unbelievable that his teacher would be an evil mad scientist plotting to conquer the world. He just didn't know what to believe and what not. Ultimately, he decided to take everything for granted, just in case. He deduced from the atmosphere that every other student thought the same. Ah, yes, you do not need to worry about your health or safety. I will not try to cause you any harm as long as you will not be asking for it. And with that out of the way, let us proceed to the main topic of this lesson, which will be the creations of Edgar Allan Poe. Dawn looked at the calendar as if she forgot what date it was. It was Monday, July 6th. They had exactly 35 days, an uncrossable deadline after which the fate of the world would be controlled by Dr. Horace Horror Rorschach, as he claimed. And it was their mission to find out how he was trying to do it and stop him before he fulfilled his villainous plan. This summer truly seemed to be unlike any other.